I can still smell the basement of Dunloring United Methodist Church. And if you grew up anything like me, you've probably spent several Sundays and perhaps the occasional Wednesday in a church basement, not unlike my own Dunloring, gathered together with dozens of other families, eating an assortment of casseroles strewn across a folding table that on any other day would be leaning against the white cinder block wall with its accompanying chairs. There would be perhaps mac and cheese, ham on potato bread, dips, chips, maybe chili, pineapple paired with a food it really shouldn't belong with, barely a spice in sight, and don't get me started on the atrocity that is ambrosia. Now, if you're not familiar, a potluck is simply a meal where every person joining brings a dish to share with the group. The etymology of the term potluck is debated among word nerds, but it's agreed that the modern usage describes the communal meal popular during the Great Depression, when food was scarce and people brought what they could. For the poorest areas of the country, like where my family survived the Great Depression in northern Alabama, that meant things like squirrel and dumplings, greens, anything you could grow or hunt on your own. During the Depression, my grandmother survived, unhoused, with her mother and baby sister, alone. And at some point, she got so sick of eating hard-boiled eggs that she would just chuck them into the grass, would rather go hungry than eat the same thing over and over again. The social services at the time saved my family. FDR's New Deal paid my great-grandmother to replant dogwood trees. And that investment in people, poor, simple, country people, is one of the reasons I'm here in front of you today. In those days, communities survived together, and it didn't blame each other when folks fell on hard times. It wasn't a moral defect to be poor or sick. It was a call of responsibility and duty for those who had enough to share. This togetherness is slipping away from our society, and you can see it in our industry as well, as we increasingly emphasize individual contributions, favoring the one rather than the whole, and perpetuate the lie that any of us can do this together, or alone, rather. We should be doing it together. Now, whether I'm by myself or in a group, I love food. I believe it is one of the great joys of life. And I have been to some incredible potlucks and friendsgivings in my lifetime. But no matter how amazing my biscuits are or your quiche is, no potluck will ever be awarded a Michelin star. And not because a potluck isn't fancy nor expensive. Michelin stars aren't actually awarded on that criteria. And although you're correct if you're thinking that a potluck isn't a restaurant and therefore would not be evaluated by the guide, potlucks won't receive a Michelin star for perhaps a more critical reason. Potlucks, by their nature, are collections of individual contributions. The pieces of the whole may be incredible on their own, but there is no harmony, no greater plan or vision tying everything together, making each piece sing with the others, and pulling a string through those individual moments to tell a greater story. As they introduced me, I'm Emily Freeman. I'm the author of DevOps for Dummies, the co-curator of 97 Things Every Cloud Engineer Should Know, and I currently run community engagement at AWS. I'm thrilled to be here with you all. Edward and Andre Michelin founded Michelin in 1889 and filed its first patent for the removable pneumatic tire. Prior to that, pneumatic tires were glued to the rim, which substantially slowed down repairs. But they had one major problem. Even by 1900, there just weren't that many cars on the road, a few thousand in France at the most. But the Michelin brothers focused on what they knew French people loved most: food. The first Michelin guide was designed to give motorists a detailed information for traveling: maps, how to repair and replace tires, where to find mechanics, where to get gas, which hotels to stay at. Being stranded isn't fun, and they were there to support them. In subsequent years, the brothers launched guides in nearby regions, many of which are different countries today due to the rearrangement of borders during the World Wars. It wasn't until 1926 that Michelin began to use stars to rank dining establishments, initially with 1 star, and then a few years later, the ranking system that is still in place today with 3 stars. The criteria was this: 1 star meant a very good restaurant in its category. 2 stars denoted excellent cooking that was worth a detour, and 3 stars told the reader that the restaurant offered exceptional cuisine that was worth a special journey, on Michelin tires, of course. It's interesting to me that Michelin, a tire company, got into the fine dining content business. They understood what few do, even today, that the direct path is not always the best path. Michelin could have marketed itself against its competitors based on its features, what made its tires better than Continental and other competitors of the time. But they didn't. They took a different approach. They thought about what mattered to people, and then they connected the dots. People love to travel, people love to eat, and they love to spend time and moments with loved ones. Giving people an excuse to roam the countryside in their cars meant, in the long run, Michelin would make more money on tires. But that was a long-term bet, a bold one, and turns out a smart one. The current macroeconomic conditions, because the R word is a bad word, it's important to remember that what separates you from your competitors isn't a list of features. It is the experience using your product. It is the community surrounding your brand. And it is the trust that you instill in those around you. Without those 3 things, you are lost. Might as well pack it up and go home. Because it doesn't matter how amazing your tech is, if people don't trust you, don't understand your point of view, or loathe the experience of using your product, they will always be on the lookout for alternatives. I think too often companies anchor their value on a list of features, on the basics of what a product does. But when you look at companies who are adored, who enjoy loyal, if not fanatical, fans, these companies talk about the why, the vision, the big picture. They express the feelings of using their product and clear the path of obstacles that would halt or slow down adoption. These companies put experiences first, developer experience first. They specifically put people first, because people are what matters. They will always be what matters for all of us. Now, I tease the Michelin brothers and the French for being fancy, mostly because they are at least substantially more fancy than I am. But France has given much more to the world than food and manners and colonialism. The truth is, France was America's first real supporter. France arguably went bankrupt in 1789 because, or at least in part of, because of Louis XVI's substantial investment in our own freedom during the Revolution. Ironically, costing him his own head, which wasn't in the original term sheet. The French, once again, came to the aid of the Americans in 1944, when the Allied forces requested a special reprinting of the 1939 Michelin Guide, which included the most up-to-date maps of the region. With that exception, production of the guides halted completely during both World Wars, because as you imagine, tourism took a real nosedive. Driving around the countryside, a lot less fun when it's littered with ordnance. You want a side of mustard, not mustard gas. Despite our long-standing friendship, Michelin waited to publish its first American guide until 2006, which, if I'm honest, was a real slap in the face. They started with New York City, which makes complete sense, and then they expanded to the next logical location, Florida. Okay. As of last year, there were under 3,000 restaurants across the globe that enjoy the honor of 1 Michelin star at least. And across all of these restaurants, no matter the cuisine, the price, the decor, the wine list, there is an almost universal way a kitchen is run. Auguste Escoffier was a force of European cuisine in the start of the 20th century. He standardized a number of French dishes, specifically the 5 mother sauces, that is hollandaise, velouté, bechamel, espagnole, and tomato. I am really putting my 10th grade French to work here, okay? But his greatest contribution was the Brigade de Cuisine, the kitchen brigade system, which is still actually in place in most restaurants today. Escoffier's discipline in the kitchen was established during his time in active duty initially as an army chef, and eventually in a chef de cuisine for the Rhine Army during the Franco-Prussian War. The brigade system injected a cleanliness and a professionalism into kitchens and established this hierarchy of positions. These are led by the chef de cuisine, literally translated to the chief of the kitchen. This person manages the kitchen, supervises all staff, creates the menu, designs new recipes. They also purchase supplies, train apprentices, and maintain a clean working environment. The chef de cuisine does not cook. They do not prepare the food. Instead, they design the experience of the guests, ensure the quality of dishes, coordinate between the front of house and the back of house, which might feel a little bit familiar, and maintain the environment and culture in which their team operates. For me, these are our CTOs, our CPOs, the VPs of engineering and product. They are accountable for the final product. They set the vision. They execute on that overall strategy by inspiring and leading the rest of the team. Although they are not often the ones coding, hopefully, they are responsible for that final outcome. The sous chef, or under chief, completes the tasks assigned by the chef de cuisine. The sous chef is second in command and will manage the kitchen when the primary chef is not around. I think of sous chefs as PMs and product owners, even engineering managers. These people are intimately familiar with the overarching vision for the product or service. They understand who the customers are and how they serve them, and they're closer to the everyday work of the team. Just as sous chefs plate food, these roles in tech ensure that the product is up to standards in regards to developer experience, security, governance, and more. Beyond the overall management, there are a number of stations specific to the Brigade de Cuisine that produce high-quality food at scale. The first is the Saucier station, which, as you might guess, produces the sauces and gravies, warm hors d'oeuvres, and occasionally sautéed items. This is the station that allows other stations to shine. They put that final patina of polish and those finishing touches. I think of this as the station of front-end developers, if you will. The product isn't necessarily required, don't jump on me. After all, we could accomplish much of what we do with extremely basic interfaces. But imagine eating pasta without sauce or eggs Benedict without hollandaise. This is the station that really applies its discipline, that transforms a plain steak into something that provides sustenance, and then transforms it into something that is an experience and established memories. Meat stations are typically split between the rôtisseur and the poissonnier, what I like to call the poisoner station because I'm immature and have a fish allergy. These are the meat and fish stations, obviously, and despite its name, the rôtisseur actually is in charge of producing or cooking all red and white meat. Unique to these stations are the knife skills, a deep understanding of the product, understanding how it's sourced, how it's best butchered, and how best to prepare it. For me, this is the back-end function of an engineering team. If the other stations are the icing on the cake, these are the actual cake, without which no meal would be possible. I see you vegans and vegetarians, I understand. It doesn't matter how beautiful your front end is. If you can't effectively store and process data, you don't have a product. You have a dribble account. Finally, the entremetier station, which often include the legumier and the potager stations, handle the vegetables, the soups, and the accompanying food items. Although vegetables aren't usually the star of the show, they are vital to the balance of a plate, the color, vibrancy, acidity, and more. These stations, for me, represent that DevOps, or platform engineering function of a team. Potatoes may look unnecessary until they're suddenly missing from the plate. DevOps is in many ways the glue of an engineering team, bringing each of the disciplines together to ship great software quickly and reliably. The last primary station is the pâtissier, or pastry chef, my personal favorite. This is where the sweet treats are made. All the desserts, from cakes to cookies to chocolates to sugar work. Occasionally, the station is also charged with making bread, and I think of the pastry chefs of a kitchen as those support functions of an engineering team. Everything from developer relations to documentation to SDKs. While not required, dessert leaves a diner with a feeling of completeness and joy. And the disciplines that support engineering efforts and products give users everything they need to feel that same completeness and joy. Unlike a potluck, a kitchen brigade functions because the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. Each contribution is absolutely required to ensure a cohesive, high-quality experience for diners. Unlike a potluck, where the result is haphazard and somewhat a result of luck, the Michelin-starred restaurants architect experiences, moments for their customers. They think about every detail before executing. And in that execution, they are mindful that each element must not only be perfection individually, but also fit with the rest of the pieces to culminate in an elevated, delicious dish of food. For us, we have to treat our engineering and product teams as whole units. We are not separate groups that contribute individual pieces and then hope it all fits together in the end. I would say that many leaders and managers in this industry focus on the potluck. And I don't mean to say that they're purposefully delivering a substandard product. We incentivize potlucks because potlucks are easier. They require a lot less forethought, and a lot of times the incentives of an organization most align to a potluck style of management. But our job is to be dissatisfied with the basic requirements, to think bigger, and to have the stamina to do the hard thing. It is orders of magnitude more difficult to run a brigade kitchen than to put on a potluck. And the truth is, the delta between those results can sometimes be subtle, even difficult to identify. But this is what separates the products that are beloved from the products that are tolerated. That level of delivery, technical equivalent of a Michelin star, it requires an entirely different way of setting a vision, of building a team, and of executing. I've talked at length over my career about DevOps strategies and techniques that can give you and your team an edge in the market. But I want to focus on leadership for this one. And I love how it ties in with the earlier talks and this focus around developer experience. I am uninterested in contributing and working in an industry that is going quietly into the night of inertia. We are the disruptors. We are the great thinkers of our time. We determine the future, and we decide what is acceptable and what is not. We arguably represent the most powerful workforce in the world right now. And together, we have a responsibility to not only do what is ethically right, but to set the standards for our industry. That is a hard balance, having one foot in the market and one foot in our community. But it's that middle path between extremes that I think provides us the most satisfaction with our work and the best possible products for our customers. Now, whether you're in a management position officially or not, I assure you, you are a leader in this industry. And we must all demand better for ourselves, for our teams, and for our companies. The Michelin standards are incredibly high. Restaurateurs and chefs strive for these awards because it is a universal recognition of their work and impact. Now, like most things, judging is subjective, but it is what the Michelin inspectors actually consider when evaluating a restaurant that interests me. The first is the quality of products. Are the ingredients sourced and treated well? Then there is the mastery of flavor and cooking techniques. Does the chef create delicious concoctions with both well-established and novel approaches? Third, you have the personality of the chef. Is the chef represented in the dining experience? And can you see the spirit of the chef in the food? Fourth is harmony of flavors. Does everything on the plate complement each other, or are the ingredients at war? And finally, the fifth criteria is consistency across visits. Is the experience the same or comparable between visits? Now, think for a moment about applying that same criteria to a suite of technical products. The services must not only be of high technical functionality and do the thing that they promise to do, but they should also represent a mastery of skill and approach. I think we'll see an emphasis on this more and more as we enter into the world of Gen AI. I personally love that the personality of the chef is highlighted as a requirement, as someone with excessive amounts of personality and an accompanying Twitter account to show it. We believe that this is solid. But stepping away from my own ego, I think the vision of a chef or a technical leader sets the tone for a product and experience. Just as all of us have a unique voice and point of view, this personality must shine through the product. And that requires teams to establish opinions on not only the best way to solve a problem, but also the best approach with which to use the product. Now, this is something that makes the vast majority of leaders and companies a little bit nervous. Because when you take a strong opinion on something, it inevitably irritates some people. The truth is, none of us can be popular with everyone. We shouldn't, not as people, not as companies. I think we all have to get to a place where we are okay with that we live in our truth. And that I believe that in only declaring yourself, can you truly find your people. Now that is easier said than done. It's a scary thing, putting yourself out there, being vulnerable, and accepting that some people aren't going to like you, use your product, etc. But I would rather live big than small, and I think the vast majority of people would agree. Our users benefit when we take strong opinions that allow them to quickly evaluate whether they should use our products or not. Harmony is particularly important for larger organizations that ship multiple products. I believe the harmony of a team is the responsibility of its leader. That person is accountable for ensuring that they hire pieces of a whole rather than a collection of individuals. Leaders, just like chefs, are also responsible for the environment in which their team operates. Everything from the communication mechanisms, the psychological safety, unity, this must all be cared for and maintained by the leader of that team. So what does great leadership actually look like? Well, I have a few ideas. I have a rule with my team. If the team wins, it's a we. We won. If we lose, it's an I lost. Leadership is first and foremost about accountability. When you sign up to lead, you sign up to share successes and take responsibility. Great leaders coach their people and their employees to succeed. I believe strongly in giving everyone something to really lead and dig into. And that doesn't mean it's the only thing they work on or that they work in a silo. It's the thing that they can be most passionate about. I encourage them to really dive in, to be bold, and they know that if something goes left, I've got them. Because great leaders protect their teams. I can tell immediately what kind of leader someone is by how they speak about their team. When a manager does nothing but brag about their team, I know that they're a protective leader because even when those people aren't present, they are allowing them to shine. On the other hand, when someone complains about their team or denigrates them in front of others, I know that this is not someone who's going to look after people, who has that trust. Great leaders get out ahead of conflict. They set the team up for success, not just with others, but within that team, within themselves. They understand the desires, the fears, the dreams of each of the individual team members. And that extra context and insight allows them to foresee potential conflict and create mechanisms to avoid it, whether that's structural or relational. Finally, leaders ensure that information is shared across the team evenly. One of the primary indicators of the health of a team, for me, is that each person is operating with the same information as their peers. When one person has additional information or a different viewpoint given to them, it puts the team off kilter. It might cause conflict. People make assumptions, they act out of fear, they begin to view information as currency, often withholding it from others to maintain power. And this absolutely affects our products and our rate of shipping software. It's important that leaders maintain consistency with their team members and across meetings, just as restaurants maintain consistency across their dining experiences. Great leaders know that their job is to clear the path and then get out of the way. Leaders are not hockey stars, they're Zamboni drivers. I believe that harmony, or lack thereof, is represented in the products that a team produces. That team cohesion a leader creates in the office or the kitchen imprints on that final experience. Integrated products sing, whereas disjointed suites of products are clumsy, require significant effort by the user. Finally, consistency. What we might call reliability is the baseline for any great organization. Consistency shows discipline, vision, and execution. A moment of success might be a coincidence, but consistency demonstrates a steady execution and discipline, as well as resiliency, or an ability to recover from failure. Consistency at scale is even more important and impressive. I wonder sometimes what our industry would look like if we awarded the technical equivalent of a Michelin star. And no, the answer is not more Magic Quadrants. Thank you, Gardner. We're all filled up. It's possible that the pursuit of such an award would drive some of us apart. But I wonder if it would simultaneously drive us to more shared standards and a willingness to take responsible risks as leaders, to repudiate the easy path and instead choose the one that drives us all to a greater outcome, one that is more disciplined, more egalitarian, and one in which we can all thrive as individuals, as parts of that whole, and as contributors to that greater story that binds us all. The real difference between a potluck and a Michelin-starred restaurant is simply teamwork. This is not a zero-sum game. Despite what some of us hear and people who try to convince us otherwise, there is room for all of us. No matter your role or position, having the courage to be vulnerable, to stand in your truth, to share your weaknesses and strengths, to appreciate the contributions of others and really see them for who they are, to make space for those around you with compassion and grace, that is ultimately what makes a great team and an industry. Thank you.